I had been looking forward to this team meeting all week, rehearsing my presentation in my head countless times during lunch breaks and late nights. The project was my brainchild, a solo effort crafted meticulously over the last 3 months, and I was eager to share the results with the team and our manager, Ms. Clark. As the meeting room filled with familiar faces, I felt a sense of pride bubbling beneath my calm exterior. When it was time to present, however, my confidence wavered. Mark Reynolds, my colleague, stood up and began speaking as if he owned the entire project. His voice was steady, his slides polished and familiar, the exact ones I had prepared. I blinked, stunned. The words he used mirrored mine almost verbatim, and he spoke with a certainty that made it impossible for anyone to doubt his claim. Around the table, eyes shifted between Mark and me, and I felt a cold wave of disbelief crash over me. How could he have taken credit for my work? My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stay composed. This was my project, my late nights, my countless revisions, my ideas that had finally come together. And yet, Mark was standing there, basking in the recognition I deserved. I caught the subtle smirks from a few team members who had always seemed more aligned with him than with me. Was this some kind of betrayal? I glanced at Ms. Clark, hoping she'd intervene, but her expression was unreadable, neutral but expectant, waiting for my response. The room was silent, and my mind raced. Had Mark planned this? Was this a calculated move to undermine me? He'd always been ambitious, but I never imagined he would cross this line. The thought stung more than I wanted to admit. After Mark concluded his presentation, the room erupted in polite applause. I sat frozen, the weight of humiliation pressing down on me. I wanted to speak up, to demand my rightful place, but the words tangled on my tongue. What if I appeared petty or jealous? What if I was wrong? The doubt gnawed at me, but deep inside, I knew the truth. As the meeting wrapped up, Ms. Clark nodded approvingly at Mark. "Excellent work," she said. "I'm impressed with the comprehensive analysis and clear recommendations." My heart sank further. She had no idea the credit was misplaced. No one did. Once the team dispersed, I lingered behind, gathering my notes and trying to steady my breathing. I caught Mark's eye across the room. He smiled, an expression that was almost smug. Was he taunting me? Or was it just my imagination? I had to decide my next step carefully. Confronting him in front of everyone might escalate the situation, but staying silent felt like conceding defeat. Back at my desk, I stared at the email thread detailing my months of work on the project. The documents, the spreadsheets, the presentation drafts, they all bore my name and timestamps. This wasn't a mere overlap or misunderstanding, this was deliberate. Mark had stolen my work and passed it off as his own. A knot tightened in my stomach. I suspected that Mark had been undermining me long before this moment. There had been subtle instances, deleted comments in shared documents, last-minute changes I hadn't authorized, and the occasional dismissive glance when I suggested ideas in meetings. It was as if he had been quietly chipping away at my credibility, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The problem was that Mark was well-liked by management and many colleagues. His charm and confidence made him appear trustworthy and competent. I feared that if I accused him without solid proof, I might damage my own reputation. Yet, doing nothing would mean letting him succeed at my expense. As I sat there, wrestling with my thoughts, I realized I needed a plan. I couldn't let this slide, but I couldn't act rashly either. I would have to gather more information, document every detail, and understand exactly how Mark had pulled this off. Only then could I confront him or escalate the issue without risking my position. The hours passed, and the office grew quieter as colleagues left for the day. I opened the project folder on my computer, reviewing every version history and email exchange. Something nagged at me. How had Mark accessed the final presentation file before the meeting? I recalled that the file was stored in a restricted folder, accessible only to me and a few trusted team members. Unless someone had shared access, or worse, Mark had found a way in without permission. I pulled up the access logs and scanned for anomalies. My heart pounded when I noticed several access attempts from Mark's account over the past week. Some were during odd hours, long after normal working times. It was subtle but suspicious. Had he been sneaking in to modify the files or gather information? I made copies of the logs and saved them securely. While I was absorbed in this, my phone buzzed with a message from Lisa, a teammate I trusted. "Hey, saw Mark's presentation today." Something felt off. "Did you know he was going to present that project?" Her words confirmed that others had sensed the irregularity but didn't know the full story. I replied cautiously, "No, it was supposed to be my presentation. I'm trying to figure out what happened." Lisa responded quickly, "Let me know if you need help. I hate seeing you sidelined like this." Her support was a small beacon of hope amid the storm. It reminded me that I wasn't entirely alone. Still, the path ahead was uncertain. I couldn't predict how Mark would react if confronted or how management would handle the situation. I had to be strategic. That night, as I lay awake replaying the meeting in my mind, I thought about Mark's motivations. Was this purely ambition? Or was there something deeper driving him? Understanding his mindset might help me anticipate his moves. I also considered my own options: confront him directly, go to Ms. Clark, or gather more evidence first. The decision gnawed at me. Acting too soon could backfire. Waiting too long might allow Mark to entrench his false claim. I resolved to stay calm, keep detailed records, and observe Mark's behavior closely in the coming days. I needed to be 3 steps ahead. The next morning, I arrived early, determined to monitor the office dynamics without drawing attention. Mark was already there, typing away with that same confident smile. I wondered if he was aware of my suspicions or if he believed he had gotten away with it. During our brief exchange in the hallway, he gave me a cursory nod but no greeting. It was cold and dismissive, unlike the friendly banter we used to share. The realization hit me hard: Mark was no longer an ally, he was a competitor willing to cross boundaries. As the day unfolded, I stayed vigilant, noting every interaction and anomaly. I made mental notes of who sided with Mark and who might support me. The office atmosphere felt charged with unspoken tension, and I sensed that this incident was only the beginning of a larger conflict. By lunchtime, I had compiled a rough timeline of events and a list of discrepancies in Mark's claims. I knew that confronting him without this foundation would be futile. Instead, would bide my time, gather evidence discreetly, and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. The sting of betrayal was sharp, but beneath it, a quiet resolve took root. I had worked too hard and invested too much to let this slide. Mark's actions were a challenge, yes, but also an opportunity to prove my integrity and resilience. The question was how to navigate this minefield without losing myself in the process. As I returned to my desk, I caught a glimpse of the project file open on my screen. It was a reminder of what was at stake. This was more than just a work assignment, it was my professional identity, my contribution, and my future. I would fight to reclaim it, but on my own terms. The meeting had ended, but the real battle was just beginning. The next few days felt like walking through a minefield. I moved cautiously, determined to uncover how Mark had managed to hijack my project without raising alarms. I couldn't confront him yet, not without concrete evidence. So, I became an observer, a silent detective in my own workplace. I started by reviewing file access logs again, this time more thoroughly. Mark's account had accessed files in the project folder multiple times over the past month, including some late nights and weekends when the office was nearly empty. That alone was suspicious, but I needed to know if he had permission or if someone else was involved. To my frustration, the company's IT policies made it difficult to get detailed access information without formal approval. I couldn't just ask the IT department for help without raising suspicion, especially about Mark. So, I took a different tack. I began noting every opportunity Mark had to be near my workstation, every time he lingered longer than necessary near shared resources, and every small inconsistency in his stories about the project. I also paid attention to Mark's digital footprint. I checked the shared drives and version histories for the project files. Some earlier drafts had disappeared or were replaced without explanation. Versions I distinctly remembered saving were gone, overwritten by files with his name attached. How had he managed that? One afternoon, I caught Mark lingering around the server room door, a place neither of us was supposed to be without clearance. When our eyes met, his confident smile faltered for a split second before he masked it with feigned casualness. Something was off. Was he trying to access restricted data or alter files directly at the source? Despite my growing suspicions, I couldn't let my emotions show. I kept my demeanor professional, even cordial when necessary, because raising alarms too soon could backfire. Mark was popular among some team members and management, and I was still relatively new here. I had no desire to be labeled as difficult or paranoid. Meanwhile, Mark's behavior didn't change. He carried himself with that same arrogant ease, as if he'd already won. He made a point of sharing little updates about the project with others, taking every chance to reinforce his role as the lead. At team lunches, he'd casually drop phrases like, "when I finalized the analysis," or, "during my presentation," each time a reminder that he was claiming ownership. I could feel the walls closing in. My colleagues were starting to distance themselves, unsure of whose side to take. Some offered sympathetic glances, but no one stepped forward to back me publicly. It was as if they were waiting for me to prove I wasn't mistaken, or worse, to lose my composure. In the midst of this, I made a point to document everything meticulously. Every interaction, every suspicious file change, every odd behavior from Mark. I created a secure folder on my encrypted drive where I stored emails, screenshots, and notes. It was exhausting work, but necessary. I needed to build a case that could withstand scrutiny. One evening, as I was reviewing email threads related to the project, I noticed something strange. Mark had been copied on an internal message about a confidential client meeting, an invitation I never received. I cross-checked with Lisa, who confirmed she hadn't gotten it either. It looked like Mark had access to information beyond his role, possibly through unauthorized channels. This discovery deepened the mystery. Had Mark been manipulating more than just the project presentation? Was there a bigger scheme at play? The thought unsettled me, but it also fueled my determination. I reached out to Lisa discreetly during a coffee break and shared my concerns. She nodded thoughtfully. "I've noticed some weird stuff too. Files disappearing, emails that don't add up." But I didn't want to jump to conclusions. She looked around nervously. "If you want, I can keep an eye out for anything unusual and let you know." Her support was a relief. At least I wasn't alone in sensing something was wrong. Together, we agreed to watch carefully but keep our findings confidential for the moment. Days later, I discovered another troubling detail. A colleague from the IT department accidentally forwarded me an email thread discussing access permissions for the project folder. It mentioned that someone had requested temporary access for Mark, supposedly on behalf of Ms. Clark, but no one had authorized it. The request had been granted without proper verification. This was the smoking gun I had been looking for. Mark had found a way to get into the restricted files, likely by exploiting internal processes or through someone's negligence. I saved the email and made copies. With this new evidence, I weighed my options. Confronting Mark directly might force a confession or at least shake his confidence, but it could also provoke retaliation. Going straight to Ms. Clark risked being dismissed if I lacked enough proof or appeared accusatory. I decided the best course was to keep gathering information quietly while preparing to present a solid case. Meanwhile, Mark's confidence showed no signs of faltering. In meetings, he continued to dominate discussions about the project, often interrupting others and asserting his supposed expertise. His assertiveness alienated some team members, but those loyal to him seemed to rally behind his narrative. The office atmosphere grew tense, with whispered rumors and side glances. One afternoon, I overheard Mark talking on the phone in the break room. His tone was low but urgent, and I caught fragments of the conversation. "No, don't worry about Danielle. I've got it covered. Just make sure the files stay clean. We don't want any surprises." The cryptic message sent a chill down my spine. Who was he talking to? Was he orchestrating something bigger than I imagined? I debated whether to report this overheard conversation but feared it might come across as intrusive or exaggerated. Instead, I made a mental note and kept it to myself, adding it to my growing list of red flags. All the while, I maintained my professionalism, completing my daily tasks and avoiding open confrontation. But inside, frustration and doubt battled with my resolve. Was I overthinking things? Was Mark simply ambitious but not malicious? The nagging uncertainty was exhausting. To keep my mind clear, I started writing a daily journal, anonymously, in a secure file, detailing events and my feelings. It helped me process the turmoil without losing focus. Every entry ended with one question: what was my next move? Late one evening, after most of the office had emptied, I received a text from Lisa. Saw Mark sneaking into the server room again at 7 p.m. Should I say something? I hesitated but replied, not yet. Watch and see what he does. That night, unable to sleep, I imagined scenarios of what Mark could be doing in the server room, accessing logs, deleting evidence, or planting false data. The possibilities were unsettling. I realized this wasn't just about a stolen project anymore. It might be about protecting a web of deception. The following day, armed with my compiled evidence and Lisa's observations, I resolved to dig deeper into the digital footprints. I requested a meeting with a trusted IT colleague, someone discreet and reliable. I explained that I suspected unauthorized access to my project files but asked for help without naming Mark directly. The colleague agreed to look into the matter quietly, promising to keep me informed. It was a small victory, but one that gave me hope. As the days wore on, Mark's posture remained unshaken, but I sensed cracks beneath the surface. His need to control the narrative was becoming desperate, and his interactions more guarded. I knew the pressure was mounting. Through it all, I clung to the belief that truth and integrity would prevail. But I also understood that navigating this tangled web required patience, strategy, and a steady hand. The stakes were high, and the path forward was anything but clear. For now, I would continue my discreet investigation, gathering facts and building the foundation for the confrontation that was inevitable. The fight to reclaim my work, and my reputation, had entered a new, more dangerous phase. I had rehearsed this moment countless times in my mind, wondering how I would confront Mark and what his reaction might be. The evidence I had gathered was mounting, but part of me still hesitated to believe he would admit to anything. Yet, I knew I couldn't keep this simmering beneath the surface any longer. The tension between us was palpable, and the office atmosphere had grown cold, as if everyone was waiting for the inevitable showdown. I found the opportunity during a rare quiet moment in the break room. Mark was alone, sipping his coffee with that same self-assured air. I took a deep breath and approached him, careful to keep my voice steady. "Mark, can we talk for a minute?" "Privately," I said, keeping my tone neutral but firm. He looked up, his expression unreadable for a moment before a faint, almost wary smile appeared. "Sure, Danielle. What's on your mind?" We walked to a corner of the floor, away from prying ears and curious eyes. The hum of the office faded into the background. I laid out the facts as calmly as I could: the unauthorized access to the project files, the discrepancies in the version histories, the missing drafts, and the suspicious access logs. I even mentioned the email about the unauthorized access request and the late-night server room visits, careful not to sound accusatory but factual. Mark listened silently, his gaze fixed on some distant point. When I finished, I expected denial or anger, but instead, he sighed deeply, the confident mask slipping for the first time. "Okay," he said quietly. "You're right. I did take the project from you." The admission hit me like a punch to the gut. I blinked, stunned by the unexpected confession. "Why, Mark? Why would you do that?" He looked down, his fingers nervously tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "It's complicated. There's a lot going on that you don't know about." I waited, urging him silently to explain. He swallowed hard and met my eyes, his voice lowering. "I've been going through a rough patch. My wife's been sick, and the medical bills have been piling up. I was desperate to secure my position here, to prove I was indispensable. When I saw your project, it felt like the only way to hold on to my job." The vulnerability in his voice was unexpected. The man who had seemed so cocky and unshakable was, beneath it all, struggling with pressures I had never imagined. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he continued, voice cracking slightly. "I was scared. I thought if I could just get this big win, maybe things would get better at home, maybe I could breathe again." For a moment, anger and betrayal warred with a surprising wave of empathy. I had painted Mark as an adversary, a schemer, but here he was, revealing a humanity I hadn't expected. "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked softly. "We work together. You could have asked for help." He shook his head bitterly. "I was afraid. Afraid you'd think less of me, or that I'd be seen as weak. I didn't want anyone to know what was happening in my personal life." The confession hung between us, heavy and raw. I realized then that this wasn't just about ambition, it was about fear and desperation. I took a deep breath, trying to process the complexity of the situation. "Mark, what you did was wrong. But I appreciate your honesty. We need to fix this, together." He looked relieved but wary. "What do you suggest?" "I'm going to talk to Ms. Clark," I said firmly. "We need to come clean and set things right. You have to acknowledge my work publicly. And you should consider getting help for what you're dealing with. I'm willing to support you if you're serious about making amends." Mark nodded slowly. "I don't want to lose my job or my dignity. I want to make this right." We agreed to approach the situation carefully. I reassured him that my goal wasn't revenge, but fairness and transparency. The last thing I wanted was to destroy his career, but I couldn't let the theft of my work go unaddressed. As we parted ways, I felt a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. The confrontation had peeled back layers I hadn't suspected, revealing a complicated man caught between personal turmoil and professional ambition. Back at my desk, I reflected on the conversation. Mark's confession shifted something inside me. The anger I'd harbored softened, replaced by a cautious empathy. But I knew that empathy didn't erase the need for accountability. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with Ms. Clark. I prepared carefully, bringing the documented evidence, the access logs, and a summary of my conversation with Mark. I wanted to present everything clearly and professionally, without emotion clouding the facts. When I met with her, I laid out the situation, emphasizing the importance of resolving the matter transparently for the sake of the team and the project's integrity. Ms. Clark listened attentively, her expression serious. "I appreciate your honesty, Danielle," she said after I finished. "This is a sensitive issue, but we need to address it. I'll arrange a mediated discussion with Mark so we can clear the air and set expectations moving forward." I left the meeting feeling cautiously optimistic. The weight of secrecy lifted slightly, replaced by a tangible path toward resolution. Later that day, the manager arranged a meeting with both of us present. The room was tense as Mark and I sat across from Ms. Clark. I watched Mark closely. His usual confident demeanor was replaced with a nervous energy, but he met my gaze steadily. Ms. Clark opened the discussion with professionalism and fairness, emphasizing the need for honesty and team cohesion. When it was Mark's turn, he acknowledged that I was the rightful owner of the project and apologized for his actions. Hearing those words aloud was a relief. The public acknowledgement restored some of the damage done, and I felt the first steps toward rebuilding trust. Mark also committed to seeking professional help for his personal issues, a promise that showed a willingness to change beyond the workplace. After the meeting, I felt a shift in the office atmosphere. The tension didn't disappear overnight, but the open conversation was a vital step toward healing. Over the next days, interactions with Mark were cautious but civil. We both understood that rebuilding trust would take time and effort. I kept documenting progress, mindful that the road ahead was still fragile. Reflecting on the confrontation, I realized that workplace conflicts aren't always black and white. People carry burdens unseen, and sometimes mistakes stem from fear rather than malice. This experience taught me the importance of balancing accountability with compassion. I had fought for my integrity, but I had also recognized the humanity in my adversary. The project, once a source of contention, was becoming a symbol of resilience and the complexity of human relationships in a professional environment. Though the battle was far from over, I felt ready to face what came next with a clearer perspective and a renewed sense of purpose. After the mediated meeting, I felt a tentative shift in the office dynamics. The tension that had clung to each interaction began to ease, replaced by a cautious sense of rebuilding. Mark had publicly acknowledged my authorship of the project, and Ms. Clark had made it clear that integrity was non-negotiable. But I knew that repairing trust was a process, not an event. I returned to my desk that morning with a mix of relief and guarded optimism. The project, once a source of conflict, was slowly reclaiming its place as a symbol of teamwork and dedication. Still, the undercurrents of tension lingered beneath the surface, and I remained vigilant. Over the next few days, Mark took visible steps to make amends. He approached me directly to apologize again, this time more sincerely and without pretense. "I know I've made things difficult," he said quietly. "I want to do better, not just for myself, but for the team." His tone was different, less defensive, more earnest. I appreciated the gesture, though I knew that words alone wouldn't erase the damage. Actions would have to follow. True to his word, Mark began attending counseling sessions to address the personal struggles he had shared with me during our confrontation. I didn't pry, but occasional updates from Lisa suggested he was committed to change. It was a reminder that behind every professional facade lay a complex human story. The office atmosphere, while still tentative, showed signs of thawing. Some colleagues who had distanced themselves began engaging more openly, signaling a willingness to move past the conflict. I noticed subtle shifts in meetings, more collaborative discussions, fewer side glances, and a cautious respect in exchanges. Ms. Clark scheduled a team meeting to address the situation without singling anyone out. She emphasized the importance of integrity, trust, and open communication. Her words resonated with many, serving as a quiet call to unity. During this meeting, I took a moment to express my commitment to moving forward, focusing on the project's success rather than past grievances. It was important to demonstrate leadership and set a positive example. Mark also spoke briefly, acknowledging the mistake and expressing his desire to contribute constructively. The sincerity in his voice was met with tentative applause, signaling a collective step toward reconciliation. Despite the progress, I remained aware that not everyone was convinced. Trust, once broken, is fragile and easily shaken. I kept documenting interactions and progress, both as a safeguard and as a way to track the healing process. One afternoon, Lisa approached me privately. "I've noticed people starting to open up again," she said, smiling. "It feels like the team is ready to heal." Her observation was encouraging. I realized that while the conflict had been painful, it had also sparked important conversations about honesty, accountability, and support within our group. As weeks passed, Mark's efforts to regain trust became more consistent. He volunteered for additional responsibilities, sought feedback, and engaged more genuinely with colleagues. Though some remained cautious, others began to see him in a new light, a man working to make amends, not just cover mistakes. For my part, I focused on my work with renewed energy and a clearer sense of purpose. The project's success was now a shared goal, and I was determined to lead by example. In quiet moments, I reflected on the complexity of workplace relationships. The line between competitor and collaborator can blur, shaped by pressures both personal and professional. Compassion, I realized, was as vital as accountability in navigating these challenges. At one point, Ms. Clark called me into her office. "Danielle, I want to commend you for your professionalism throughout this," she said. "It hasn't gone unnoticed. Your approach has helped stabilize the team." Her recognition was gratifying, yet I felt the responsibility acutely. This situation had tested not only my resilience but also my capacity for empathy and strategic thinking. She continued, "Mark has shown genuine commitment to improvement, and I believe with continued support, he can regain the team's confidence. But it will be a gradual process." I nodded, understanding the nuances. Leadership wasn't about quick fixes, it was about patience and consistent effort. The project itself began to gain momentum, with the team rallying around shared objectives. Progress reports were positive, and client feedback was encouraging. It was a tangible reminder that despite setbacks, success was still within reach. Throughout this period, I maintained open communication with Mark, setting boundaries but also offering guidance when appropriate. Our interactions shifted from guarded to professional, and occasionally, even collaborative. One afternoon, as we reviewed a section of the project together, Mark paused and said, "Thank you for giving me a chance to make this right." I looked up, surprised by the sincerity. "It's about the work and the team, Mark. We all need to hold each other accountable." He smiled briefly. "I'm learning that." These moments, though small, signaled a turning point. The tension that had once defined our relationship was giving way to a cautious partnership. Outside of work, I continued to process the experience. I journaled about the lessons learned, the importance of evidence, the courage to confront difficult truths, and the strength found in empathy. I also recognized the value of allies like Lisa, whose support had been invaluable. Navigating workplace conflicts is rarely a solo endeavor. As the weeks turned into months, the office buzzed with renewed energy. The project's success was a testament to perseverance and the power of reconciliation. Yet, I remained mindful that vigilance was necessary. The workplace is a complex ecosystem, and the seeds of conflict can sprout unexpectedly. For now, though, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The storm had passed, and the team was healing. I felt ready to move forward, carrying with me the experience of this ordeal, a reminder that professionalism, integrity, and compassion must coexist in the face of adversity. Weeks passed, and the office began to hum with a renewed sense of purpose. Mark had been steadily working to regain the trust he had lost, attending counseling sessions regularly and actively participating in team projects with a more genuine spirit. The tension that once filled the air had softened, replaced by cautious optimism and the quiet rebuilding of professional relationships. I observed these changes with a mixture of relief and vigilance. It wasn't easy to forget the betrayal, but I recognized the courage it took for Mark to face his mistakes and work to amend them. There was a subtle shift in the way colleagues interacted with him. Some still kept their distance, but many were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Slowly, the fabric of our team was mending. One afternoon, Lisa caught me in the hallway, her eyes bright with something like hope. "Danielle," she said, "I think we're turning a corner. People are talking again, sharing ideas, even collaborating on new projects. It feels like the team is coming back to life." Her words resonated deeply. I had felt the change too, a growing sense of community replacing the fractured dynamics that had threatened our shared goals. It was a reminder that even the most difficult conflicts could be catalysts for growth if handled with care. Meanwhile, Mark continued to demonstrate his commitment. He volunteered to lead a smaller initiative related to the original project, approaching it with humility and a willingness to listen. I found myself offering guidance, our interactions less charged and more collaborative. It was a cautious partnership, built on the fragile ground of earned trust. Yet, amidst this progress, I remained mindful of the lessons this experience had imparted. Workplace relationships are complex and often fraught with hidden struggles. Ambition can drive people to unexpected actions, and personal hardships can ripple into professional lives in unpredictable ways. One afternoon, Ms. Clark invited me to her office for a private conversation. She began by acknowledging the difficult months we had endured as a team. "Danielle, your professionalism and composure have been exemplary," she said. "Your approach to the situation helped stabilize the team and set a standard for accountability." Her recognition meant a great deal. It was validation not just of my work but of the values I had tried to uphold under pressure. She continued, "Mark has shown real growth, and I believe with continued support, he can fully reintegrate. But it's a process, one that requires patience and vigilance." I nodded, understanding the delicate balance of leadership. "I agree. It's important to hold people accountable but also to offer support when they're willing to change." Ms. Clark smiled, a rare softness in her expression. "Exactly. And I'm pleased to announce that the company has decided to promote you to Senior Account Manager. Your dedication and leadership have not gone unnoticed." The news was both surprising and gratifying. I felt a surge of pride tempered by humility. This promotion wasn't just a personal achievement, it was a testament to the trials overcome and the resilience shown. As I settled into my new role, I reflected on the journey. The project that had sparked conflict was now a symbol of perseverance and collaboration. The success we achieved was shared, a product of both individual effort and collective healing. I also thought about Mark's story, the pressures that had driven him to deception and the path he had taken toward redemption. It was a reminder that behind every professional facade lies a human story, often complicated and fraught with challenges. In the weeks that followed, I made a point to foster an environment that encouraged openness and support. I encouraged the team to communicate honestly and to seek help when needed. The experience had taught me that compassion and accountability must coexist to build a strong, resilient workplace. One afternoon, as I reviewed the latest progress reports, I glanced at the empty cubicle where Mark had once sat during the height of the conflict. He had taken a leave of absence to focus on his recovery and personal matters, a step I respected and supported. That vacant space was a silent reminder that no matter how carefully someone plots against you, the truth always leaves a trail. It also symbolized the delicate balance between justice and mercy, the understanding that people can falter but also grow. As I looked out over the office floor, I felt a quiet resolve. The challenges faced had shaped me, teaching lessons in integrity, patience, and empathy. I was more cautious now, yes, but also more hopeful. The project's success was a testament to perseverance, and the story behind it, a complex web of ambition, betrayal, confession, and reconciliation, was a chapter of my career I would never forget. Workplace conflicts rarely come with neat endings. They are messy, complicated, and deeply human. But with courage and compassion, they can also be opportunities for growth and understanding. And so, I continued my work, ever watchful but open to the possibility that even in the most difficult moments, there is a path forward.